Okay, I wanted to weigh in a little bit on the graduate discussion that's taking place so far. Really enjoyed reading all of your analysis and observations from the film. Um, Interesting that Giovanni noticed the first and last shot. If you look at the first and last shot of The Graduate, they fit in with the overall theme of the film. In both the first and last shot, he's using a public conveyance, so he's in really no control over where he's going. The last shot is a little bit different, as somebody noticed. That It was Mike that noticed it. That all eyes are on Ben at the end, but no one's paying attention to him in the beginning. Think about the ending as we continue this discussion. Some of you noticed that the expression on his face kind of changes, and some of you kind of thought it was like a happy ending, like that he got what he wanted. I think that the ending is really open for interpretation, but I think they certainly both, at the very last shot and the very last closing seconds of the film, their expression kind of changes into this "what now?" And something to think about as we wrap up this discussion tonight. Do they really escape their destiny? If you read the article, which it looked like most of you did from reading your responses, the article, a big part of the theme of the film is suburban malaise and trying to break out of this life that your parents have carved out for you. So did they really? Ben gets the girl, but he does end up with the partner's daughter. Are they going to do something different? Or are they going to settle down into the same kind of life that his parents had? I think it's open for interpretation. A lot of you made comments on the costumes. No one seemed to pick up on the fact, though, that Mrs. Robinson was always dressed in animal prints, alluding to her predatory nature. Another one of those subtle things that Nichols throws in there as part of the art direction and the overall look of the film. Some of you mentioned, and I mentioned in the responses, another one of the film's themes is communication, particularly lack thereof. One of the lyrics to the song, to one of the songs, is people talking without listening. We see that in one of the opening scenes of the film when he goes over to the Robinsons' house, and first Mrs. Robinson asks him what he's drinking, and then Mr. Robinson asks him what he'll have to drink. And both times they give him the complete opposite of what he says. So nobody's really listening to each other in this film, and I thought that was a really subtle way of showing that, and then it was reinforced by the song lyrics. Sean and a couple other people mentioned the opening where you see Ben on the right side of the frame and the rest of the frame is just white. So he's taking up very little of the frame, and then you have this big white space taking up the rest of the frame. Mise-en-scène is how to place the objects in the frame, and this is brilliantly done by Nichols. There's only one object in the frame, Ben, but by putting him at the far right side with all that empty space, that conveys just through mise-en-scène his loneliness and his isolation. So little subtle things you can do as far as where you're putting the objects in the frame to express the themes of the film and what's going on in the lives of the characters. Some of you also picked up on a lot of the closed forms, how Ben is tightly framed, and then some of you noticed how that changes towards the end of the film as Benjamin really kind of tries to claim his own identity, going to Berkeley, trying to find Elaine. But the film, that's one of the themes of the film too, is that he's really trying to assert his manhood. He doesn't want to be thunk of as a boy or as a child anymore. That's one of the reasons he goes on and has the affair with Mrs. Robinson, trying to assert his manhood. Okay, and then there's also, Yuri made a really nice observation on the use of lighting, which also plays a role in how we see Ben. We see him in one scene with Mrs. Robinson where his face is half darkened, which is a brilliant shot showing the inner conflict within Benjamin. Right or wrong, should he really be doing this? So think about all of those things as we continue the discussion tonight on The Graduate. This is a great film to use in this kind of class because hopefully you're starting to see how just the elements that we've learned about in film so far can really come together to subtly change your perception of the characters and of the story. So we've already seen how the shots and the lighting, camera movement and angles have played a role in this film, and now the mise-en-scène, how Nichols arranges all those elements on the frame. Most of you noticed from my notes in the pre-film lecture, but noticed in the film how Mrs. Robinson is always between Benjamin and us, the viewer. Little subtle things like that, bringing things together. Ben being framed in by strangers or by Mrs. Robinson, so that he's framed within the frame, showing this kind of confinement and entrapment in his life. So hopefully you're noticing how those elements are coming together in a film, and that will continue as we move on. So I'll check back in with you tomorrow to wrap up our discussion on The Graduate and to talk about some of the other things that we'll be doing this week.